Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at how we can dismiss a modal view here in iOS. So I've got an example right here running, so we can take a look at this really quick. So I can show the modal view, and I can dismiss it just manually like that. I can have a non-dismissible modal view right here where I have to actually type to dismiss it. That way I can close it there. And I can do a small modal view by doing custom sizes with that. And again, I can type right here and dismiss that window as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we can actually make that project happen. We're going to start with the modal view itself first, and then we'll go to the actual root view or the main view we're working with in the project, and then we'll go into how we can actually do some custom work with that, like making it so we can't dismiss that. So the first thing we have in our modal demo is it's a standard UI SwiftUI view. So you just make a new SwiftUI view inside your project, and we have to add an @environment variable. And so the @environment property wrapper is how we access this, and we use the \dismiss so we can reference the dismiss on that. And I use the really creative name of dismiss because I'm Mr. Boring, and it's really easy to simply just describe exactly what's happening right there. We also, if we want to have that modal view have some form of information collection from there, we have to have an @state for that because that's how we can access information from the screen itself. So an @state variable will be working on that. So I have a private var named user input. It's of type string, and I give it a default value of quotes because I don't want to pass anything to it when I create the actual view itself. So I have a default value right there. I'm using a standard Z-stack approach for holding my information together. As you can see, I've got my green color. I've got a V-stack with text with the modal view. I'm using a text field with type something here and text as user input. And then I have a conditional logic here. I'm using a condition to say if that user input dot is empty, and then a not operator to invert that answer. And that only shows the button to dismiss that if I actually type something in. So if I go here in preview, you can see right here, I type in that value, and I have the dismiss window option that I can actually click on. And that uses the action of calling dismiss modal. Now that could of course be passed as a closure to that, but I like writing methods because it makes it so that you can easily work with your code, write better code in the long run, and come back and see exactly what you're doing with your code later on, especially when you haven't looked at it for a while. I usually use a method with my code to make it so it's really easy. I have an example with a closure call on that on the example here in a minute, but the general rule is to use a method with that. As you can see right here, I'm having my func dismiss modal. It returns a void, and it just calls dismiss. So it just pulls it up directly for that. Dismiss is built into the actual view, and it has that view be collected from the stack of information. Let's go ahead and take a look at the root view of that. Again, with my creative naming conventions, it's main screen view. And so you can see right here when we're working with the main screen, we have to have some state variables that work with our modals. I have multiple modals on here, so I have multiple different @state property wrappers for it, and they're really descriptively named. So can show modal view, can show small modal view, and can show non-dismissible modal view. They're all of type bool, and I default assign them to be false because that's exactly what we're working with. As you can see right here, I have my Z-stack, and you can see I've got my text and my buttons that I'm working with, so I can actually call those. Because I'm using it with user interaction, one of the most common ways to handle user interaction is with a button, and that's where I'm doing that. And so I have my show my modal view, and it has an action. And here's the example of using that closure for an action to simply just call something right there. It's really quick if it's a one-liner, but again, you might have more to do with that, so it's really a better choice to use methods for that than simply closures. But I use a closure on that, and so I have my can show modal view dot toggle, which toggles the Boolean value of that associated state property. And then I have my can show non-dismissible with a non-dismissible call, and it calls that method right there by the name of the action on that. And then again, the show small modal view with that, again, using a closure example for that because it's the smaller modal. And so that's what we do is we just simply call the method, attach that in the action for it, and actually make the modal happen. And so to do that, we use the root component of the view we're working with. In this case, it's a Z-stack, so I'll collapse my code. And you can see right here, I've got my Z-stack at the root of my body, and I attach the .sheet is presented property to each of those. So I modify the sheet is presented. You can stack these on multiple times if you wish. In this case, I have 3 different modals I'm practicing. So I have 3 different sheet is presented property modifiers on top of that Z-stack. And so the sheet is presented, it uses the bound value of that associated property. So I have can show modal view, can show small modal view, and can show non-dismissible modal view. And so with the can show small modal view, the only change I have right here is the presentation detente, and it has an array value of what I'm looking for the size on that. I can do a custom size like I have right here of 100, or you can use the associated pre-built-in detente sizes like .medium or .small that are already built into the actual type. And you can take a look at that on practice with that as well. But that's all you have to do to make it so it shows up. So again, I click on that show modal view, it calls it right there, so it goes up here, it toggles the value of the can show modal, brings up a modal demo view, and I can just swipe that out of the way because I'm not using it. However, if I clicked on for a non-dismissal modal view right here, I can't swipe that away. I try and pull down, it's stuck, I can't dismiss it. And the way we do that is by modifying the actual modal view itself. Let's go ahead and take a look at that one. So my non-swipeable one, I have the same approach with the @environment with the dismiss. I have the same state private var user input, because again, I'm really boring in my variable names to make life really easy. What I do change right here is I have the .interactiveDismissDisabled property with user input.isEmpty. I have to have a Boolean expression that I can pass to this, and so I'm using the fact that I have to actually type in here to be able to dismiss that window. I also have that same approach matched to the Boolean on that. So if I take a look at my window right here, that button is disabled unless I have my user input is not empty. So I can have that same approach with that, so I can tell the user you have to actually type this unless you value and enter. And again, you want to make sure you do this so you explicitly define information for your user so they can understand why that modal view won't dismiss. So make sure you provide good information for that. And again, this is how we can actually share information or collect information in a way with the user that's separate from the actual interaction. And we do that by using a modal view. And again, just go to my modal demo view right here. Simple thing right here, I just have to have the @environment for the dismiss and a state to get the information. And in the main screen itself, I have an associated Boolean state variable that I work with on that. I have my Z stack that calls the associated action modifying that toggled value of that Boolean. And then for each of the modals I'm working with, I have a sheet. I have a sheet as presented. I associate the bound value of that toggle variable, and I call the appropriate view from there. And that's how you can actually do a quick little work on making a modal view. You can customize that for a smaller version right here, so you can see that it's much smaller. And again, it's the same basic approach, and I just dismiss that window because it's the same value I have right here in my modal demo view. I'm just saying, hey, this one's smaller to make that happen. And you can even have a small one that's not dismissible by having the approach of using that modifier on the actual modal view. I hope this is a helpful way you can work with modal views. Cheers, see you next time, and have a good day. Bye-bye.